You're listening to This Motorcycle Life, conversations about why we ride. The Film Festival Special. I'm Bruce Philp. Thanks for listening. Before we get started, a couple of important pieces of business. First, I want to acknowledge, as always, the promotional support of my friends at Eat Sleep Ride. The stories in these podcasts are about riders like you and me, and Eat Sleep Ride is a great place to meet them. You can find this online community and magazine at eatsleepride.com, and as an avid user, I can also recommend that you download their super useful free mobile app at your preferred app store. I don't ride without it. Thanks, guys. And second, I want to say thank you for the supportive emails I've received from listeners over the last few weeks. As you can probably tell, this is something of a passion project for me, so your encouragement really means a lot. And I appreciate your patience as I try to figure out how to get these out a little more frequently. You guys are awesome. Thank you. So this episode is a bit of an experiment. You might recall a couple of episodes ago I spoke to Caius Tenche, the director of the then upcoming first ever Toronto Motorcycle Film Festival, which took place last week. We talked about bikes and movies about bikes. And after we spoke, Caius asked me if I'd be interested in moderating a panel discussion on that same subject with some of the filmmakers and judges of the festival. As incentives, I got to go to the opening night party, I got to see all the films, and I got to record the panel discussion for this podcast, and you'll hear that in a moment. As an aside, first, I have to tell you that a motorcycle film festival is even more fun than it sounds. If this or any festival is close enough to attend next year, do yourself a favor and go. It's a fantastically immersive experience for people who are passionate about riding, and the feeling of community is intense. You won't be sorry. Now, because you'll only be able to hear and not see the conversation I'm about to share, and you probably haven't seen many of these films yet, let me set the stage a little. On the panel were Jory Lyons, the director of a documentary film called A.K.A. Broken Tooth, along with Oliver Solaro, the larger-than-life subject of that film. There was Jacob Black from the cast of the film Dream Racer, which went on to win both Best Feature Film and People's Choice honors. There was Ned Thanhauser, the director of The Monkey and Her Driver, and Matthew Sanders, who directed Trailmaster. I'll post links to these films where I can find them, and to the festival website in my show notes. Also on the panel were festival judges Preet Banerjee. He's a Canadian media personality and an avid rider. He was piloting a very nice-looking Panigale that day. I didn't catch the other arrivals, unfortunately. There was Warren Milner, a motorcycle writer, adventurer, and technical guru. Bill Petro, a professional photographer and a Canadian Motorcycle Hall of Fame inductee. And Tony Sharpless, a champion racer and also a Canadian Motorcycle Hall of Fame inductee. We chatted in front of an intimate audience because we had some competition from one of the most beautiful riding days of the fall so far, and it was generously hosted by presenting sponsor Pfaff Harley-Davidson at their impressive Toronto dealership. Harley's new Softails provided comfortable seats for the panelists, and I thought added a certain energy to the proceedings. It was a bit surreal being surrounded by these charismatic machines and seeing all that blue sky out the window, but it just goes to prove that if anything can come remotely close to the fun of riding motorcycles, it's talking about them. Now, I'll warn you that I'm not really that great in front of an audience, so you'll forgive me for not being especially smooth at times here. But the panel was fun, and I thought offered some real moments of insight. I hope you agree. Here's our conversation. So the first question I wanted to ask of the filmmakers is, who rides and who doesn't? Who's a rider? So one non-rider in the group? Yeah, but you get. Okay, I wasn't sure. So I thought that was the case. So the directors, I'm thinking particularly the ones who ride, filmmaker or biker, which comes first?
Okay. Just making sure. I would say it's equal.
Yeah.
I'm kind of feeling the same way. Write a lot, try to do some films, yeah.
Yeah. Did one compel you to do the other? Were you inspired to kind of become a filmmaker because of your experience as a writer, or how did that go?
Actually, that's a good question. I think I got into bikes first, and then just because I loved them so much, I don't know, I got into a little bit of video, and it was just an easy thing to start aiming the cameras at.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, I started writing in 1970, and didn't know anything about film, and picked up and did a documentary film, had nothing to do with motorcycles, and that basically turned me into a filmmaker, and did a number of films, worked with Matthew on one, and my wife is a motorcycle rider, and when we hooked up several years ago, like a decade, she had 2 bikes. Her bike and her boyfriend bike. So I bought the boyfriend bike from her immediately to take it out of circulation.
That's a great story.
But we still ride all the time. So yeah, so I think it was motorcycles first and then filmmaking for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you can kind of see where I'm going with this. I'm curious about all of your perspectives on this. What do motorcycling and filmmaking have to do with each other? Because clearly the answer is something.
I don't know. In my case, I've dabbled a bit in a little bit of amateur filmmaking and a bit of writing. But to be honest with you, I don't consider myself either or. I think first and foremost, I like to think of myself as a fashion icon. Secondly, husband of the year.
Disagree, yeah.
And then filmmaking, motorcycling comes like distant third and fourth.
Right.
True
Anybody
story.
else wanna-
Trendsetter.
Anybody else want to comment on that? I mean, there are millions of motorcyclists around the world who not long after they start riding go and buy a GoPro. There's something about these two
Well,
things that
I think that the thing that really attracted me to it is that it's a high energy sport. And if you do the right kind of shots, you can communicate the thrill of riding, doing that. In any motorsport, you can do that. Matthew has done a lot of this, more professionally than I could hope to do. He's got the equipment and experience, and he's done amazing things for Icon, for example, some of the stuff on the Maryhill loops.
I think oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to chime in. I mean, I'm going to speak for Simon Lee a little bit, who created Dream Racer. Simon not only doesn't ride motorcycles, he's petrified of them and he hates them with a passion. But I think that one thing that anyone that's got any sort of storytelling nous anywhere within their soul and can understand is that motorcycles are incredible access points to really compelling stories, and they always have been, and they always will be, and that's why motorcycle films are so engaging and so compelling, because motorcycling is so engaging and compelling. So Simon certainly has shared with me that's been his experience, that the romanticism of motorcycles for him really captured him, and how sort of engaged people are about motorcycles really captured him. Not enough to get him on one, but certainly to make a pretty decent film about them. So,
yeah, you could tell in Dream Racer how caught up in that he was. I mean, to the point where he could hardly separate himself from what was going on the other side of the camera. I guess, I mean, most films about motorcycling are films about people, a statement of the blindingly obvious, but I'm curious to know, and this might be an unfair question given how many of you are, motorcyclists, by identity, if not only by lifestyle. But I guess the question is, why does it matter that the people these films are about are motorcyclists? Could they not be golfers?
Well, I don't think we would have qualified for this year's Film Fest if they were.
That's very fair.
That was the only reason, was to get in here.
Thank you, Oliver.
As a filmmaker, you want to make a movie about like a subject that entertains you, right? Mm-hmm. And you're gonna be putting a lot of hours and time into it, right? So I feel like it's an excuse to go on an adventure in your case. You would never be camping out in the desert had you not been on that story, right? And I would have never been in Attawapiskat had I not been riding with Oliver. So I think you're chasing, everybody's looking for an adventure, and as a filmmaker, you're chasing a good story. And like you said, good stories happen on motorcycles, so.
And from the judge's perspective, you saw a lot of these films, including films that didn't make it to the kind of final cut. How would you answer that question?
Well, I would say that there's nothing very pedestrian about motorcycling, and it's a topic and subject that elicits a lot of passion. Even for those who don't motorcycle, they're very passionate about not being motorcyclists because it scares them or whatever. Right. But for the people who do partake in the activity, I think there's a special kind of community, right? You know, you see it when you're riding and you salute to another rider, you wave to them as you go by. It's a special community that isn't celebrated as much as other topics are on, you know, the Hollywood silver screen. Like, you see very few movies about motorcycling. So it's a great outlet to have this film festival and festivals like this that explores this one topic.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Anybody else want to add to that?
Well, I think a little bit too that there's an element in a motorcycle film festival that, you know, it has to in some way represent motorcycling. It has to try and explain why people do it. Everybody knows riding motorcycles isn't the best thing to do from a safety point of view or a financial point of view, but yet thousands of people are drawn to do it every year. So, you know, a motorcycling festival has to somehow try and capture that and explain a little bit, you know, who are these people and why do they do it, you know? So I think that's sort of an important element of it too.
Yeah, I agree.
I have to push back on the financial thing. So I'm kind of like a finance guy, and I say motorcycling is a great way to manage your personal finance. You got free parking in the city of Toronto.
That's right.
Doesn't consume as much gas. Yeah, I think it's great.
I tell people it's not a boat. So something you said, reminded me of a conversation I had with Caius when we first met, about the character of films that are being made about motorcycles. So historically, if you were to make a list of the most famous and defining films about motorcycles and motorcyclists, they would mostly be pretty dark stories, right? Somewhere along the line in the last few years, that changed. So not only at this festival, but in the general kind of canon of recent motorcycle films, they're all pretty positive. They're all pretty uplifting. They're all pretty optimistic. They're kind of often joyful. Anybody want to take a shot at guessing what changed, why things are different now? Because I think they are. Tell me if you disagree.
I think there's actually a real sort of counterculture pushback about sort of the increasing intrusion of safety and nanny statism and all that sorts of things into people's lives. And people are more used to cars that drive themselves and cars that are you know, the experience of being connected to the road is being eroded from inside cars. And there's lots of places in life in modern society where it's really hard to feel independent and alone and have that freedom. And so I actually think that for a lot of people, motorcycling is sort of that last bastion, that last opportunity to really capture that freedom of spirit and run with it. And so I think that, you know, we see that there's more and more and more women moving into motorcycling. And I think that that's massively positive. I think that that's a really good example of sort of how motorcycling is giving people something that they couldn't get elsewhere. And so I think that's why you're seeing sort of more positive films and more positive attitudes, because people are looking for that connection back to the road, back to freedom, back to independence. And you can get that still on a motorcycle in a way that's much more tangible than it is in other aspects of life.
Right. Anybody else got thoughts on that?
I think it's nowadays a lot of people are chasing that thrill. I mean, like bungee jumping or jumping out of a plane, or I work a lot of motorcycle shows throughout the winter, and you wouldn't believe how many times I've sold a complete outfit, motorcycle outfit, to somebody that has never thrown a leg over a motorcycle. They're going in the spring to get their motorcycle license, and they've never ridden a motorcycle, and they're buying a helmet, jacket, pants, boots, gloves, and I just, like, my hat goes off to them. Like, they're just so, gutsy and just want to try that, something new. And I think that that's why the movies have become more positive, because we have just more different characters in the sport now, where before, back in the olden days, it was a badass thing, and it was you either belonged to a club or you raced motorcycles. Now, I think it's a lot more of a pleasure or a thrill to ride a motorcycle.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think we can tip the hat to the manufacturers as well. They've done a really good job of building the bikes that we want. I mean, there was a time when we had a fairly narrow range of bikes that we could choose from, and then we would tailor them to the way we wanted to ride them. And now we just have so many delicious choices of motorcycles,
Right.
don't we?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Jory, as a relative outsider, how would you answer that question? Why are motorcycle films so much more positive?
To be honest, I've never seen a negative motorcycle film,
Yeah.
so
I have to agree.
I'm not sure. But yeah.
Well, but
I
you
mean,
have to admit, like Easy Rider didn't end well, you know, for example.
That wasn't about motorcycles.
But if you go back to the granddaddy of them all, On Any Sunday,
Yeah.
I honestly think they were always good and, or you say them, dark and happy. I think they were all there. It's what we chose to watch or
Right.
what was maybe relevant at the time.
Right.
But there is, like Tony said, a resurgent to pure adventure right now, and motorcycles just fit so perfectly to that lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the parallels that I've seen is I used to do a lot of mountaineering and rock climbing back starting in late 1970s. And back then it was kind of a, why would you go in the mountains and fall off and die kind of thing. But the awareness of the safety of the sport, the equipment that's come out that's more available, the barriers have been reduced, the fear factor has gone down, and I see the motorcycle industry kind of going through a similar kind of curve.
Yeah.
Like Oliver said, the bikes, you have a vast array. The market is being segmented. Every $1,000 you can buy a bike, pick your price point.
Yeah.
So you have a lot more choice, and then you have the brand management and the outreach. I mean, look at this store. The brand management of Harley Davidson is worldwide.
Yeah.
And you can remember back in the 70s when you meet the nicest people on a Honda,
Right.
which was kind of the vanguard of motorcycle culture coming into the USA.
Yeah, this brand is a great example. I think one of the great branding stories of the modern times, frankly. You mentioned women, and I'm curious about...
I did not.
I think well, something about women coming into the sport, I'm pretty sure it came up. So 3 of the films that made the cut this year had women as their subjects. I think Michelle has shot 2 films that were about women who are riders. This feels to me like a huge force in the industry right now and culturally as well, and an immensely positive one. What is magic about that perspective from a filmmaker's point of view? I appreciate that obviously none of you have made, they're not the makers of those films necessarily. You accept it.
I'll comment on that one.
Please do.
The dog bites man is not a story.
Yeah.
The man bites dog is a story. And here we have seen a culture that's primarily dominated by male writers, advertising targeted to males. And so we're seeing a real change in that dynamic now. And I think that when I started working on The Monkey and Her Driver, the 2 women that are in the film, Kendra and Betty, are friends of ours. And we went to a racetrack and saw them race sidecars and said, wow, this is pretty cool. We knew of no other woman team that teamed up to do motorcycle racing like that. And so the light bulb went off in my head saying, this could be a story.
Yeah.
Had no idea how it was going to unfold, but we followed them around for a year and we got a great story. So hopefully that will help promote, again, more women entering the sport as well. So that's how we got to that film.
Yeah, here's to that. Anybody else want to comment?
I just want to say out loud that my wife, in a sort of ADV type adventure motorcycling context, is badass enough to ride circles around most of my male friends. And I just want to put that out there.
I think we've got people on the panel that pioneered in that area. I mean, Tony Sharpless was out there swinging when it really genuinely was hard for women to get out there, and I don't presume to know what that was like, but the work that was laid then is coming to fruition now, and it's been a slow burn. But I think that we've got to. It took a long time for women to sort of to have good access to our sport, and now they do, and we're seeing the rewards of that, and there's financial rewards and industry rewards and everything else, and it's a massively positive thing.
Yeah, there's no doubt. But I'm still curious to know, and maybe there isn't an answer yet, whether their point of view adds something to the culture of the sport. Is that too nerdy a question, Tony?
Of course, I think inclusivity is the way to go with anything. I was brought up in a family where if I wanted a G.I. Joe doll, I could have it, and if my brother wanted a Barbie, he could have it. There was no distinction between, male or female roles in our family. It was so natural for me to be introduced and to gravitate towards motorcycles. So I had I guess it's using a horse term, a huge leg up, but right. I was fortunate to have that early introduction to motorcycles, and I kind of wavered away from it for a while and then was drawn back to it just in my teens because I loved the racing aspect of it. I like speed and so I think anybody that just has tendency to like speed would be attracted to racing motorcycles. I think that's a natural fit to me. But and if you like freedom, there's no other feeling than riding on the street on a motorcycle. So whether you're male or female, I just think that motorcycles has a lot to offer to everyone. I don't look at it. I don't look at that distinction between male and female.
Right. Right, and neither do most of the people who've made films on the subject, which I think is enormously admirable. It's never been a political kind of question. I appreciate your answer. Thank you. So moving on to something completely different, I noticed in some of the films that I watched this year that the motorcycles had names, and I got to wondering whether the machines are characters in these stories. I'm seeing some nods. Anybody want to grab that one? Are they? And so how?
Yeah, I mean, very deliberately, Betty and Kendra named their hack, as it's called, Dixie. And Dixie, I tried to make a character in the film because Dixie wasn't cooperating and the girls had to figure out why. And that was part of the narrative trajectory. So, yeah, I mean, I think it becomes very personal. And, I tried to make Dixie, again, a character in the film along with Betty and Kendra. So, yeah, definitely, you name it.
Yeah, well, that's the impression you left. I mean, it was like a mute beast that was trying to be understood. I'm sure all of you got something to add to this.
Yeah, so, I don't know, a few years back, my wife Michelle and I wanted to go on a, Bow Chicka Wow Wow weekend in Quebec.
Right.
Taste some stinky cheeses, and we came back with an $1,800 KLR. And we got her in Saint-Agathe-de-Mont. And Agatha just, logically came out of that. Agatha's one of those names where when you think of someone named Agatha, you're down to earth, salt of the earth woman who
That's right.
you just, she's going to make it work no matter what.
But when Aggie was having a bad day, we were all having a bad day. So
Yeah, if Aggie's not happy, nobody's happy.
So the point of view from not on the bike is kind of counts too. Like I'm thinking about Dream Racer. I was kind of right there with you, waiting for that blue thing to come over the top of a dune. And although the director didn't make a lot of it, he didn't try to turn it into an animal, it really did become, for me anyway, a character in the story. Can you comment on that from the viewpoint of the car?
This question's really highlighting the fact that sort of me being here is a little bit like the old lady that sat on the bus stop next to Tom Hanks being up to talk about Forrest Gump. But I mean, sort of, there's so much in Christoph's sort of journey and what Christoph was doing and that physical struggle that he had, that I know that we could have made the bike more a part of that story, or Simon could have made the bike more a part of that story, but the bike actually performed pretty well throughout. And so sort of those characters only really show their head when they're being cantankerous, and Christoph's bike wasn't. And I think he gave it a really stupid name that we didn't want to highlight either.
Can you share that?
I can't remember it. It was that stupid.
I think there is also an element that riders of motorcycles get very connected to their motorcycles, especially if it's in a environment in which they're counting on the motorcycle to get them through or to save their butt because they've got themselves into a bad situation. So you see it all the time in racing, where the guy wins a championship or he wins a race and he pats the bike. because he feels that real strong connection that, sort of I couldn't have done it without the help of this bike, and it didn't let me down, and it sort of got me through whatever the difficult thing was. And so you feel that connection. Perhaps the naming is just, it sort of makes it into a bit of a person, and you don't feel so silly that you're patting an inanimate machine that really has nothing, no character. So I think maybe the naming just makes that sort of personal connection that you feel like, wow, it's me and my friend, that have survived. A bit like boats are the same,
Yeah, I mean, I have this little kink that I think they sort of look like animals anyway, so it was kind of a sucker question to me, but I just feel like there's another audience back there of one-eyed, burly judges. Okay, good. So that wasn't completely an insane question. I'm curious about, actually, while we're talking to that end of the road, did you see patterns of this kind in the work that you reviewed? In terms of, did they all, was there a theme or some overarching common thread in the work that you judged?
Well, with respect to the riders and their motorcycles, when you mention it, you kind of think back and realize that you did see that, and you see that all the time, because there is a special quality to the relationship between the rider and their machine. Yeah. I'll give you an example. So I used to, I tried to become a race car driver, and there's a stock series that I raced in where you had different cars. They're all the same make and spec, and you had different cars throughout the weekend that you would drive, and there was some that you just really liked. Even though in theory they're supposed to be exactly the same, there's quirks about them that you either like or you don't like. And so you form this emotional attachment to certain pieces of machinery. So even though they are inanimate, there is that emotional, physical connection. And you see that and saw that in all the stories, right? You can sort of see the quality of those relationships. And it's not something that you sort of are cognizant of at the time, but when you reflect and after you ask that question, yeah, you could totally see that, especially with Broken Tooth. I mean, that one is probably like the perfect example of the relationship and that bike getting him through such dire conditions.
Yeah. Hell or hard water.
Please.
I think also there's an element of the filmmaker is the same. As was just discussed with the sidecar film, I think sometimes the filmmaker just says, and I got that very much with the sidecar movie, and I got that very much with the movie, the Trailmaster movie, where you got the sense that the filmmaker thought, what a cool story this is. I just want to tell this story. Right. So it wasn't so much just the writer and his machine, but just as much the filmmaker just came across, maybe by accident, this super cool story that he just felt like he should share it because this is something people should know.
Yeah.
People should know there's a crazy guy riding across the top of Canada in winter. It's an interesting story. That
somebody should know that for sure.
And you wouldn't know it otherwise if the movie hadn't been made.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So just to poke a little bit at this, a lot of the films that appeared in this festival and in others have a kind of inspirational intention to them, if I can put it that way. There's something that we're supposed to take away about challenge and courage and whatever else the filmmaker was trying to say. I'm wondering about why that is. So we go back to the example of golf. I'm sure there are inspirational golf movies. I don't know because I don't play golf, but it doesn't feel like a natural to me. And yet this space seems to produce story after story that kind of lifts your spirits a little bit. Do you think that's a fair observation, and B, why do you suppose that is?
Well, you haven't seen The Legend of Bagger Vance?
No.
I'm a golfer as well, so.
I don't mean to be hard on golfers.
That's okay. We deserve it. I think, the emotional element for me, when I watch my film, even last night watching that film, I get a real emotional about seeing these girls coming from, self-inflicted problems as well as not figuring out how to fix the bike, and then seeing them succeed, especially, as I said last night, they went on in 2016 to win the #1 plate
Yeah.
because they could show up. They never really placed in the high areas, but they were there every time. The dedication to their sport and to being there. I think that right there, I find a real strong emotional connection to the dedication. I mean, Christoph, a magnitude more than that in terms of what he went through.
Yeah.
But again, the commitment to your sport and achieving your vision, dreaming your dream, I think had a lot to do with helped me really enjoy doing the narrative trajectory of these gals being successful.
Yeah, no doubt. Anybody else got a similar story to tell?
I think, so, and this is going to sound a little negative, and maybe it is, but I think all motorcyclists suffer from a little bit of guilt about why they ride a motorcycle, because it's such a selfish thing, And so I think all motorcyclists feel a certain need or urge to explain or justify, why. So there must be some higher purpose. There must be some bigger reason than it's just fun, and I just want to go out and have fun.
Right.
So I think, a lot of the charity rides and so on, which is why they're so well attended and so well funded, is because motorcyclists just generally have a little, because it's so much fun, but it's such a personal thing,
right,
that I think there's a little bit of guilt there that
it's very
there must be more to it than just fun.
That's very interesting.
Well, to add to that, I mean, riding a motorcycle is an inspiring thing to do. I like to, and trying to convey that to other people so that you can get them excited about the thing that you're so excited about, I think is important for a lot of us too. Like, I like to say to people that riding a motorcycle is unique because in the same moment you feel very, 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 very big and very, 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 very small and vulnerable. And those two concepts collide instantaneously in your mind in a way that nothing else I've done achieves. So I think that motorcycle films and motorcycle stories are inspiring because riding a motorcycle is a personally inspiring thing.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. There's a point in the process of becoming a rider around sort of somewhere between the 3rd and 5th year when you realize you've got this and you're not terrified all the time anymore and you feel like you've accomplished something. And looking around the audience the other night, it seemed like a lot of the people there might have been more or less at that stage. So you could easily get caught up. But I think there is courage involved, and that seems like a great place to start if you want to tell an inspiring story. So that kind of bridges to we're getting close to the end of my questions, but this one is kind of interesting to me. To ride a motorcycle is to choose to be dramatic. So even if nothing bad ever happens, when you go out and you pull on your gear and you have your rituals and you start the bike and you check and see that all the lights are working, there's a certain kind of before battle kind of drama about that experience that I don't think you ever lose. And then all the way up the scale to racing the Dakar. So none of these things is necessary. And surely life has enough drama in it without us manufacturing it, and yet we do. As people who have observed or participated in that process, riding a motorcycle in the high Arctic, for example, I don't think that was necessary at all. Why do we manufacture drama? Why do we need that?
Because you don't know you're alive until you're just about dead.
I mean, you're perched up on two wheels, totally vulnerable, living as a visceral human being against the din of humanity on a motorcycle, and you're doing it legally. What more reason do you need than that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking, Tony, of you. I mean, gritting up for a race, no matter how professional and experienced you are, surely must be a dramatic moment, and it's clearly optional. You didn't have to be there. What drives someone to live that life? I
think I was introduced early to the sport, so it just always felt natural to me. I think also there's a Seinfeld show that I think Feats of Strength or something. Well, that was kind of our family. We were very competitive. We're stubborn. It kind of runs in our family. So I think that you need those elements to ride a motorcycle. Like when when Christoph is riding in the sand dunes and picking up his bike, and you need all the stubbornness and the determination that you can muster to keep going. And in minus 40 degrees Celsius weather, you know, for the Broken Tooth to travel and keep pushing towards his destination and his determination to meet his goal. I mean, it's just, I think motorcycling kind of captures that the best. Anybody that has those character traits, I think that motorcycling is, you know, you can explore all, like, your determination and how far you push, like, you know, riding with broken bones or without a budget, like the ladies on the sidecar, you know, they had no budget and kept pushing. You know, motorcycling captures all of that, I think. Best sport that I can think of.
That'd be fine.
An outlet for stubbornness. That's an interesting way to look at it. Anybody have anything to add there?
Actually, I have a question I'd like to pose to everybody if you're finished on that comment. And one thing I noticed, and I've always wondered, through all of this discussion about the spiritual or the love of motorcycling, if I were to ask why in the countries where motorcycling is a form of transportation first and a form of entertainment second, we have the biggest audiences to sporting events and the biggest heroes that come from there, where here in North America, where we talk about the freedom of motorcycling, the sport of motorcycling is struggling. You barely can get someone to come out, yet they'll watch it on television. You know, I just put the question out there, why is that?
That's a really good question. I don't know what the answer is, but that's a really good observation.
Yeah, it's interesting. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You saw it in the Dakar rally. I mean, those people were, just look at them, they're fanatical.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll add another perspective and just take a sec. I started riding in 1970 and was riding dual sport in college. We went and saw On Any Sunday and was hooked after seeing Bruce Brown's film. And then, you know, got married and went to work and had a job and kids and the whole thing and put it down. And then I met my wife, who was an avid rider, distance rider, still is, not as much distance, but it's great when your wife says, let's go for a ride. And it's been great. She stepped towards me and she says, let's go hit some balls. So it's been a great relationship bonder for us to have that common interest. Yeah. And that's really been great for me. Plus the fact that, you know, you get the joy of riding in addition to doing it with your best friend.
Yeah, I understand that.
I think, Bill, the point that you make about those countries is, I think that in North America and other countries where where motorcycling isn't transport for everybody, the concept is really inaccessible to people. It's hard to understand how difficult it is. It's hard to understand how enjoyable it is and everything else. And that's why it's so important for us. You know, I mean, as you know, I'm a motorsport a journalist. I write about it. It's important to bring those stories to people because in those countries where motorbikes are a way of life, they understand how difficult it is. They understand all the elements that go into being on a bike that make it difficult. So when they watch it live, they have that understanding already. They're already some way into the story. Whereas in North America, perhaps, you know, the vast majority of the population isn't part of that story yet. They don't have a waypoint into it. So it's not as compelling yet because they haven't had that initial access.
I mean, I don't want to sound cynical about it, but I can sort of, I think, maybe blame the access to information that we have in the sense that why go to the Daytona 200 when you can Google a 4K video of it? Why take the chance of breaking a leg out on a trail somewhere in the BC Rockies when you can do the exact same thing on YouTube? I think there's a bit of that going on with our youth, with cars, I think, in general, too. Like, how many 18-year-olds are in a big rush to get their license now? I mean, for the most of us here in the audience, man, when we were 16, we were out of there, weren't we? Like, were we not, like, on our 16th birthday, just jonesing to get our license and just feel that wind? Well, I don't see that in our youth today so much. Like, I have a couple of kids now, and they're knocking on their 20s doors, and they're in no hurry to get out there and do stuff. And I see more and more of that, and I think that just sort of overlaps within the motorcycle industry. And I don't know if it's a cost prohibitive issue. I don't know if it's the insurance that it takes to get a bike nowadays when you're 16 or whatever. I don't have the answers. But I don't think it's just a motorcycle-related thing. I think there's just something going on there that we need to look at with the way our society is growing up.
Yeah, I think that's probably true, and it gets discussed a lot in online forums and stuff like that. But I kind of wonder if sometime in the last 100 years we had this same conversation about horses. Yeah. That as soon as we didn't need them anymore, they weren't relevant. And when they weren't relevant, it was a lot harder to care about them. So now, a century later, you have a tiny, tiny minority of people who are passionate about equestrian sports, and everybody else couldn't give a hoot. So it feels like there's a connection to me between how necessary they are as a form of transportation and how easy it is to get people to relate to them as a sporting outlet. It's an interesting question.
I think there's also just the fun factor, you know? I mean, when you think about how, you know, the 70s and 80s and people were clamoring to get their driver's license, and on their 16th birthday, they'd be ready to go, whereas now they're waiting years and years. From my perspective, cars today have lost their souls compared to, you know, decades ago. Whereas with motorcycling, that's not the case at all. So I don't know how to bridge the answer that Bill asked about, you know, a freedom of expression versus, you know, maybe what Jake was saying about relatability. But when it comes to just the sheer fun factor and why there is such a strong community around motorcycling, it's because it's just so damn fun.
Yeah.
I think that it shows in the films when the one of the riders had fallen in Dream Racer, and Christoph would go by, "You okay? You okay?"
Yeah.
And then the same thing in the Trailmaster. They were this same thing, that, you know, making sure that the riders were okay, and they're looking after each other in the pits there. It's kind of like a big fraternity, and I feel fortunate to be part of the motorcycle community and the fraternity that goes along with it. And I think that that's kind of how some of those gangs start, like the film that we watched, Take None, Give None. Thank you, Warren. You know, it's a feeling of community and togetherness, and I don't know how to make the younger kids feel that or get inclusive into motorcycling unless they, you know, are introduced to it at an early age or dragged out to the racetrack, or, you know, fortunate enough to have a mini bike given to them as a kid. You know, I think you touched on a lot of, you know, even though you were being a little cynical, I think you touched on something, you know, where you can watch it on a video instead of going out and doing it. And somehow kids think that that's a good replacement. So I don't know. I think you're touching on something that needs to be worked on, but I don't have any answer.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think the trick is to actually go out and do it, because once you do, you'll see that it is quite a bit different than just watching, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It's just how do you get them out there the first time?
True of everything. I've got one more quick question, but I know that there are a couple of you that have a plane to catch. Do you want to sit the last question out, or should we cut you loose? Yeah? Okay, a quick one, or hopefully quick. So these films matter to us a lot, or we wouldn't be here. But I'm curious, you know, as Bogart might have put it in Casablanca, do the adventures of a few motorcyclists amount to a hill of beans in this crazy world? Forgive me for butchering the quote. Do these stories have something to offer all those people who are driving around in their cages today? Are they of value to the world at large?
I think that they do. I think that I know from experience that I've got friends that don't ride and are pretty far removed from it, don't really have any interest, that have seen Dream Racer, for example, and been really inspired sort of about that central message of inspiration that's in there. I think that we saw, there was the Virginia's Harley last night, had a really great, there's a lot in there for people that want to do any sort of artisan thing or any sort of individual independent thing. So I think there's, the motorcycle stories are still human stories, and human stories are always relatable. It's important to tell as many different stories as we can about humanity and society, and that's how you build humanity and society. And so certainly I think that whether the film is based around a motorcycle or not, if it's a compelling story, then it deserves to be told, and it has a lot to offer for people regardless of where they're coming from.
Yeah. That's a good answer. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'd say the same idea, that telling these stories, they don't necessarily have to be about motorcycles. The experience I've had with my film is I've submitted it to a number of festivals that have nothing to do with motorcycles, but are short format films. And it feels to me, they've been rejected mostly, that they're not paying attention to the story. They're saying, it's motorcycles, we're out of here. But the more we can get exposure to the stories of real people doing real things, the fact that it's on two wheels is almost a subnote. But here you got people struggling. I mean, I think Dream Racer is a great story of dedication, and the filmmaker also is a great story of dedication.
Yeah.
And I think if we can get more of our story out, our messages out to an audience that isn't looking for motorcycles, but has a story about life and struggle and achievement and setbacks and recovering and never giving up, I think that's really a great opportunity.
Nice. Anybody else want to add to that? A closing remark? Guys, what we'll do... Oh, please.
I was just going to say, I feel like I might have done you guys a disservice because people that don't ride motorcycles sometimes think people that ride motorcycles are crazy, and here I am showing people my film, and they're like, yep, that's what we thought.
I worry a bit when people come up to me and say, oh, that was so inspirational. The last thing I want is to be someone's inspiration.
I just loved that Trailmaster movie because I just wanted to load up the toy hauler and head out to Oregon after I saw it.
I highly recommend it.
Cutting trail and I've been out cutting trail and getting black fly bites and making a trail and then scrubbing it in, and I just it just hit home for me, and just wanted to say that was a really good film.
Thank you. And just to kind of go back to your question, and I think a lot of the work I've done in the past has always been trying to figure out a way to entertain. Usually my films are funny, I say stupid, but they're funny, or a weird way of showing something with motorcycles that's more entertaining or more action, but trying to do it in a way that if I show somebody, a little kid who doesn't care about motorcycles, they're still they still want to watch it for whatever reason. Yeah. And Trailmaster, in that one, I think it is definitely that environment where we were is unlike any other, and just just to be out there in that space and then to ride a motorcycle through it is incredible. I mean, it really is. I do highly recommend it if you ever get a chance to go out that way, rent a bike or whatever, but it's like riding through enchanted forest. I mean, it's just amazing. So, I mean, if somebody can watch that and just appreciate that a machine will take you through this place, like no other vehicle can, I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is cool. Okay, so shall we excuse who needs to go, but invite the audience to interrogate the rest at will?
Yeah. I think we're going to. Yes. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Well, we're going to continue the Q&A. If any audience members has a question, I do want to thank you, Ned, and thank you very much, Matt, for joining us all the way from Portland, and for your movies. Thank you very much. Have a safe flight home. Okay, if we want to turn over any questions
Sure.
from the audience?
Does anybody have a question for all or one of the folks on the panel?
I think this can apply to judges and filmmakers. Was there a moment that you saw or a moment that you were participating in while shooting where you just went, that's why I'm doing this, that's what this is about, and that privilege you have for that few minutes knowing that you've caught something or seen something that was special?
There was one moment where I thought I had it. It was before you were on the bike. We were on the winter road. The truck broke down where it was getting dark. It was really cold. It was snowing. There was nobody on the road for a long time. Oliver was jacking up the truck. It was super dramatic, and it was our first time out together, so like we were feeling it as the crew, me and Tim. And Oliver went into the forest, and he chopped down a tree to like prop up the jack. And he walked across the road right as a car was coming in the backlight, so there's just headlights, and Oliver just dragging this tree out of the forest. And I was just like, oh my God, this is why we're here, this is why we're here, this is why we're here. And I thought I rolled for another 5 minutes, and I didn't even press record. It wasn't the shot, didn't get it, but I thought I had it. I thought that was the one. I was like, we did it, and it never made it. So yeah, it was a great moment.
There were literally hundreds of like unbelievable filmable moments that, be it equipment issues or the cold fogging up the mirrors on the lenses or
stupidity.
The rings or the truck breaking down or whatever, or the light was bad, but my God, there were just so many like Discovery Channel moments that were not staged that we really could have capitalized on that we just couldn't get.
The part I liked, Joy, was when you said to him to get to Oliver, he was frozen. He couldn't get his helmet off because his mustache or beard was frozen to his chin bar of his helmet, and his eyes were frozen, and he was cold. Like you could feel the cold looking at him, and especially on the big screen when you could see your eyes, it was just, you could feel that cold. I've been in that situation, not with my mustache frozen to my chin bar, but and then when you said, Joy, get inside, man, warm up, get inside, it really gave you that emotion, that you were in it, you were part of that.
Now, they froze their tushies off too, by the way. I need to mention this. The back of the truck was open for a good portion of that, and it is minus 35 degrees, and they're hanging out the back of it. And the heater didn't work in the truck as well for a good part of it as well.
Well, from my perspective, from watching the films, for the last couple of years, I had found that the amount of time that I was out on my bike had been going down and down every season. And then I started watching the films, and it reignited my passion so much that I started to ride more. And even then, I decided to actually buy a new bike. So it's changed my trajectory, which was on the down path, and now I'm, as avid as I've ever been with motorcycling and getting out to ride. So I think that's a testament to the festival, right? And these stories that the filmmakers are documenting and sharing, and why it's so important for people to see movies like this.
I think, and I'll just be quick because I'm starting to bond with this Harley Davidson. I've given it a name and everything already. But the moment for me that really sort of summed up the whole festival was watching the Giovanni movie, where it's a very short movie and not a lot of dialogue in it, And at the end, I just thought there was just that moment at the end of it. I kind of thought, that is motorcycling. That totally sums up what motorcycling is all about. Here's a guy, he just loves riding bikes and working on bikes, and it's not about show and flash and being important, or it's just a guy on his bike and he just loves riding. And that to me was a moment that I thought, wow, this is motorcycling defined in that one movie.
I agree. My comment on that movie, on the Giovanni, was it was just like a big plate of warm fettuccine Alfredo. It just went down so good. That movie was just really well done, and the passion and just came through, and the humor and the honesty. It was a really good film. I'm glad you brought that film up because it was one of the good ones.
Yeah, it was one of my favorites too. I think of the two films represented here, the moment I actually loved the best was when you dropped the bike in the driveway at the end.
Yeah, that makes two of us.
Not because of any kind of schadenfreude or anything, but because it was just such a human moment, and it just contextualized the whole thing. And in Dream Racer, there was an editorial sequence where it went back and forth between you guys wondering where he was, and his helmet camera capturing trying to lift the bike up. And for me, it was like a perfect illustration of how alone he actually was. The film craft told the story of how, you were there to observe, but he was out there as alone as you could be. And it was all because of that grainy, crappy helmet camera footage. It was just lovely work, I thought.
Like grainy, crappy camera footage from that camera that they gave us. So... Whoops.
Well, anything would be grainy and crappy
great footage.
in the
it was
desert.
Great footage, very high quality camera.
I'm going to blame that on the environment, okay. Who else has a question for...
Yeah. Speaking of that helmet cam footage, he's out there running the race. I know you've got limited battery life with those helmet cams. Is he changing batteries? Is he saying at some points, I'll probably crash here? How is he getting those shots or choosing when to run the camera, or did he just run it?
I think he was running the camera most of the special stages. Yeah. He had one spare battery set that he was swapping in, so a lot of the special stages are broken up with a liaison or a mandatory fuel or rest point, and he could swap batteries then. But it was mostly just like making sure that he used the battery only in the difficult stuff you get a good idea of what's coming up with the road book. You know sort of where it's going to be hairy and fun and where it's going to be kind of boring and lame. So he had a couple of hours a day and he used them pretty well.
And for the shots that you guys got, how much of that was just happy accident? How much of it was planned out like that? Like stage 12, right? When you're there and he kind of the crowd parts and he kind of rides out of the crowd. How much of that was pre-planned? How much of that just...
No, it was almost entirely happy accident. There wasn't a single shot that we got of Christoph that we knew when it was going to happen. It was just hashtag always be rolling. Right. So, yeah.
That was that moment was fantastic. That was really a great shot.
I just want to jump in if I may. I thought I'd join the panel. Just on the comment about that you made, Bruce, with the scene where Christoph was out in the sand dunes on his own and the crappy camera footage. Nowadays, it is incredibly easy to go to a store and buy the latest camera that's got 4K video, and you can put a Steadicam on it, and anybody can buy a drone and so on. So everyone has access to that. It's become a commodity. The craft is in the storytelling. I think it's not in the camera equipment. The fact that there was a crappy video footage coming from Christoph's helmet was irrelevant. The story was there, and that's what made that moment wonderful. And I think that's where the craft of the filmmaker comes in. It's not about, let me just go out on a ride and strap a camera to my bike. Yeah. It's, let me tell you a story.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, first of all, let me be clear. I actually think that the environmental challenges that camera had to deal with helped the story. I think it would have been much weaker if that footage had been crystal clear and perfect, but I don't even think he could see that well, right? So I think that helped. But secondly, I think your point about the editorial craft is the one that really counts. That was great storytelling. That few minutes was totally riveting. I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Oh, I'm really loud. But sure. All right, you want. Yeah, well, I can't really think of a lot of questions since you asked so many great ones, but since you're talking about the technical element, and I guess it's really the filmmaker who can answer this question, and maybe Jacob as a friend of filmmaker, but all the first-person footage, I think, does lend a completely different perspective on films now, is that the idea that, this is actually the experience firsthand, unedited, unscripted, unplanned, it's all there. And so how has that changed? Because I think it's actually given us a really interesting perspective in a lot of different films to have this this narration from the ground, but it's not planned footage, it's not cinematographer. So how do you, Jory, incorporate that as a filmmaker, stuff that you didn't, because that's a whole different, like that's all about editing and...
Yeah, the first few drafts didn't have any. I didn't want to use it. I find GoPro, especially these days, is just everywhere, and I just get tired of looking at it personally, so I didn't want to use it, but it comes down to telling the story, and I find it does look great, but you just needed it. You needed to tell the story the moments you weren't there, and same with the film quality. The first couple drafts, I didn't use half the shots that are in there just because there's dirt on the lens. There's a piece of dust, and it just drives you crazy. You're like, I can't show this to people. There's dust on the lens. What was I thinking, right? And why didn't I wipe the lens off? But when it comes down to it, it's story, and it kind of adds that grit too, right? So, and the audio quality and all that.
I'll go on record as saying that for all the Oscars that they hand out, I think film editors are the ones that deserve the absolute most accolades, because they have the most thankless job of all.
Anybody else?
Can I just say one thing?
Please.
And I think it's winding down. I'm going to have to thank Caius for inviting me, and I think I'm going to speak for the other judges, because where I noticed it the most, through my whole life watching films, and specifically motorcycle films, I've never been in a theater where the audience participation changed the outcome or my opinion of the movie, and that was great. I really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thank you. I personally share that experience as well. Watching the movies on your laptop or even on your TV screen is completely different than watching them in theater. Not just because of the size of the screen and the audio, but the people around you. Like, it just raises everything to a completely different level. And as I mentioned in one of my closing speeches one of the night, seeing the theater filled with people, having that experience, you all made my dream come true, and it was wonderful. Okay, I want to thank all the members of the panel.
Festival organizer Caius Tenche's wife and daughter were there that afternoon, volunteering for the festival. And after the formal program ended, and everyone lingered to say goodbye, they surprised him with a brand new Harley Davidson. It was to congratulate him for creating this great thing for the riding community here, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house. I wouldn't mention that personal detail, except that it seemed to sum up what all of these movies, and what gatherings like this, and I guess what riding a motorcycle itself are all about. People coming together around something that challenges and inspires them, and turns their lives into stories worth telling. Well, thanks for listening. You'll find show notes for this episode at thismotorcyclelife.com, and that's also how you can reach me if you have questions, comments, or suggestions. You can find me on Instagram at thismotolife, where I like to post pictures of bikes I find on the street, and after boycotting it for the last couple of years, I finally decided to surrender to Facebook, so you can come say hi there too, on our very own This Motorcycle Life page. In the meantime, stay tuned for more episodes this fall. I'm working on some interviews I think are going to be pretty cool. And keep staying alive out there.